Okay, let's dive into this. We hear that term overnight success thrown around all the time, right? Especially with stars like Kevin Hart. But what if I told you that whole idea is a myth, a story designed to make us quit before we even get started? Well, today we're going to break down the real playbook behind one of the biggest empires in comedy.
And Kevin Hart, he does not mince words. This quote right here, it just cuts straight through all the noise. See, the story we get sold about instant fame, about viral moments changing everything, it's mostly a fantasy. Hart's journey wasn't some lucky break. It was a long, calculated, and honestly a pretty painful grind that most people just wouldn't be willing to go through.
And that brings us to this number, 13. Think about that. That's how many years it took from his very first time on a stand-up stage to what he calls his moment. You know, that breakthrough that changed absolutely everything. That's over a decade of grinding in the dark, of invisible work, before the world even really knew who he was.
So what did those 13 years actually look like? Well, Hart has a really powerful way of describing it. He doesn't see it as a steady climb up. Nope. He calls it a long, brutal flatline. This was the phase of putting in maximum effort for basically minimum reward. A time where he was honing his craft in empty rooms and just facing constant, soul-crushing doubt. And to put that effort into perspective, check out this number, 28. During this flatline, he was doing up to 28 stand-up sets in a single weekend. I mean, can you imagine driving from Philly to New York, bombing a set, getting home at 4 in the morning, and then getting up to do it all over again? This wasn't a hobby. This was a total obsession, and it was fueled by one core belief. And there it is. That's the source of that relentless drive. This one single lesson from his mother became his entire operating principle. Through all the financial struggles, friends telling him he wasn't comedian funny, and those moments where he must have questioned everything, this was the one non-negotiable rule that just kept him going.
You know, this timeline really puts it all into perspective. He says most people, they opt out around year 2, maybe year 3. By year 6, the pressure from everyone around you, your family, your friends, to just get a real job must be immense. But Hart, he just stayed in the game, completely convinced that this grueling process was the only way forward. Okay, so all that struggle, it leads to this crucial shift in thinking. The work he did during the flatline wasn't just about surviving day to day. It was all about preparation. Hart was operating with his absolute certainty that his opportunity was coming, and that his only job was to be 100% ready when it finally showed up. This was his entire mindset. He'd see other comedians, guys like Cat Williams, have their moment, and instead of feeling jealous, he actually felt confirmation. It was like proof that the system worked. He just knew his turn was inevitable if he kept getting back in line, perfecting his material, and just staying ready. So, what was the moment? It was his headlining set at Shaq's All-Star Comedy Jam. And because he was so prepared, he didn't just perform a set, he absolutely ignited the stage. That one performance was the spark that lit the fuse, leading directly to his special Seriously Funny, which then just went supernova. Now, after that moment, Hart's success graph, it just goes vertical. And this is the part of the story that's so often overlooked. It wasn't just about being a popular comic anymore. This is where he strategically pivoted from being a performer to building an entire business ecosystem around his talent. A total game changer.
And this wasn't random at all. He executed a clear 4-step playbook. First, he finished the job. He mastered stand-up comedy. Then, he used that success as leverage to get into movies. From there, he built Heartbeat Productions to create his own opportunities. And finally, he expanded into ventures and partnerships, turning his name into a full-blown brand.
And you can see that leverage translated into just massive box office success. The movie Think Like a Man, boom, over $90 million. Then Ride Along completely blows past that with over $140 million. This wasn't luck. This was the direct financial result of a decade of preparation meeting one single opportunity. So how does a comedian from Philly suddenly become a savvy investor navigating these complex venture capital deals? Well, it required a massive intellectual shift, a willingness to embrace what he calls being the dummy. He says the biggest thing holding most people back is just plain insecurity. We're afraid to admit what we don't know, so we stay silent in these rooms where we could be learning so much. Hart chose the complete opposite path. He decided he was going to be the guy to ask the dumb questions about investing, about brand partnerships, about how money really works. And that right there is the real unlock. By being secure enough in himself to be the dummy, he got invited into conversations he would have otherwise been totally excluded from. This is how he learned the game of business and finance from the inside, simply by having the courage to say, "Hey, I don't understand that. Explain it to me." And all of this brings us right back to the very beginning, to that core lesson from his mother. The entire empire, the movies, the businesses, the investments, all of it stands on the foundation of one simple but incredibly powerful idea.
Hart sees so many of us, especially entrepreneurs, trapped in what he calls the quitting cycle. You know what it's like. It's like having a dozen browser tabs open at once. You feel like you're doing a lot, but you're accomplishing nothing. The moment one thing gets hard, you jump to the next shiny object. The finisher's path is the exact opposite of that. He just nails the core problem right here. Spreading your focus too thin doesn't increase your odds of success. It actually guarantees you'll never complete anything significant. He chose to finish stand-up comedy, to see it all the way through to absolute mastery.
And this is the ultimate takeaway. The finisher's mentality is so counterintuitive in a world that just glorifies starting things. But it's not about doing only one thing forever. No, it's about doing one thing first, and doing it so well that it becomes the unstoppable leverage you can use to achieve all your other ambitions. Master your one thing, and it will open up the entire world to you.
So, ultimately, Hart's story isn't just about comedy or business. It's really a mirror. And the question it reflects back at every single one of us is this. In a world that celebrates starting, what is the one thing you need to finish that could unlock everything else?